Welcome to the deep dive, where we take big, complicated goals and, well, try to break them down into something you can actually use. Actionable insights, measurable progress.
Yeah, and today we're tackling a big one, maybe one of the most frustrating objectives out there in self-improvement.
That linguistic holy grail, achieving fluency.
Ugh, fluency. It's become such a universally disappointing goal, hasn't it? Because it's just so vague. It's
Right.
like saying, I want to be rich or I want to be happy. Sounds great, sure, but what does it actually mean? Practically speaking, when you sit down on a Tuesday afternoon to study,
We all have that image, don't we? The effortless chat in a Parisian cafe.
exactly.
Yeah,
But the word itself, fluency, it's been watered down so much.
that's really the heart of the problem, isn't it? Our sources point out that fluency just means less and less every time some, guru pops up promising fluency in 7
Not
days.
3 months, yeah.
And that vagueness, it isn't just annoying, it's actually a huge drain on motivation.
Oh, it's a psychological pitfall. A big one. When your target is this abstract, distant mountain peak like that perfect, effortless conversation, your motivation just tanks pretty quickly.
Because the day-to-day stuff feels like, well, a grind.
Precisely. Think
Yeah.
about it. Drilling grammar tables, memorizing these long, frankly boring word lists. If the process itself isn't giving you small, immediate wins, your brain's filters just switch on.
Right.
Your brain basically decides, okay, this is irrelevant, it's difficult, it's unpleasant, and all that hard work you're putting in, it just leaks right out of your long-term memory.
Which brings us straight to our mission for this deep dive. This is for you, the learner, who wants that quick, solid knowledge, but without the burnout that comes from chasing a ghost. We're going to unpack some really specific strategies from our sources today. The goal is to replace that vague, kind of disappointing dream of fluency with actual short-term victories. Things you can measure, things you can achieve, and things that actually get you excited to keep going.
Yeah, we need to swap that abstract endpoint for concrete progress markers, things that give you those quick, satisfying hits of success. We need to turn language learning into a structured system, really, a system of small, rewarding wins that make you want to come back tomorrow.
Okay, so let's unpack that then. If fluency isn't the mission and the goal isn't just this vague get better, what are the concrete steps? What should we actually be aiming for day to day to guarantee that, continuous trackable improvement?
Well, the first big shift, maybe the most powerful one, is just embracing numbers. Statistics, even.
Okay.
Instead of this fuzzy goal of understanding the language, we need to start treating something like vocabulary count as a hard, quantifiable measure of your comprehension success.
And the sources give us some surprisingly clear goalposts here, don't they? They show that a really solid functional foundation in pretty much any language starts by focusing on the top, 1,000 to 2,000 most common words.
That's right. It's a tangible goal, something you can actually track in Anki or whatever flashcard app you're using.
Hey.
It's based on solid linguistic principles, too, like Zipf's law, which is all about word frequency.
Right, the idea that a few words do most of the heavy lifting.
Exactly. It's exponential leverage, really. If you know roughly 2,000 of the most common words, our sources confirm you hit about, get this, 80% comprehension.
80%.
Yep.
Just from 2,000 words.
80%. It means you can basically get the gist of almost any non-specialized text or conversation. The main players, the nouns, the verbs, you understand the general flow. Grammar at that point, it mostly just clarifies the relationships, who's chasing whom or when something happened.
Okay, 80% comprehension. That feels like a massive victory in itself, a real milestone worth, actually celebrating. Because suddenly the language isn't just noise anymore, right? It's mostly understandable.
It flips the switch from overwhelming to manageable.
But for the serious learner, the one who wants to go beyond just the gist, those higher targets, that's where the real pull is. What does it take to jump from getting the gist to really functional understanding?
Well, the vocabulary needed definitely increases, but interestingly, the gain in comprehension percentage starts to slow down. That's Zipf's law again, kind of working in reverse.
Diminishing returns.
Sort of. To get to 90% comprehension, which is a really comfortable level, you need roughly 5,500 words.
Okay, 5,500 for 90%. That's a bigger jump.
It is. And then for true mastery, where you rarely encounter unknown words and general stuff, 95% comprehension. That takes about 12,500 words.
Wow, okay. But look at what we've done there. We've completely replaced the vague goal of I want to be fluent with something super specific and measurable. I need to learn 3,500 new words families to hit 90% comprehension, and I can literally track my progress towards that number every day.
Exactly. That clarity is the antidote to that motivational drift we talked about.
And the tracking itself needs to be part of the reward system, right?
Absolutely. Don't just, manually tick off words. Use the stats in your learning tool.
Yeah.
Seeing that vocabulary number actually move from, say, 2000 to 2050, that's a measurable, immediate reward. It reinforces the habit.
Okay, so we have these number targets. When we start building that vocabulary, the sources say we should optimize for the easiest wins first, right? Not jump straight into, like, obscure philosophical terms.
Correct. Don't make it harder than it needs to be initially. The very first small victory should be building a foundation of words that are just inherently easy to remember.
And the recommendation is pretty specific. Start with those 625 simple, common words that you can easily visualize.
Yeah, think concrete nouns, dog, house, chair, and basic verbs, run, eat, sleep.
Yeah.
And crucially, the sources hammer this home. Learn them with pictures, not translations.
Ah, okay. Why is that so important?
It completely changes the memory game. Instead of creating this shallow two-step link, like connecting the foreign word gatto to the English word cat, you create a deep, direct link. From gatto straight to the concept, the actual image, the feeling of a cat.
So you're bypassing that sort of translation filter in your brain.
Exactly. You bypass the filter that tends to flag abstract, seemingly irrelevant information as forgettable. You're making a direct connection to meaning.
That makes sense. In this foundation stage, it anchors everything else.
It really does. It makes it so much easier later on to handle more complex sentences. Like, my small black dog chased a large striped cat up a very old oak tree. If the core bits, dog, cat, chase, tree, are already automatic because you learn them visually, the sentence structure isn't nearly as intimidating.
Okay, so build that solid, concrete, visual foundation first. Then what? We move into customization. Because our native vocabularies are huge, right? Tens of thousands of words covering everything. We can't learn everything at once in a new language.
No way. And you shouldn't try. Specialization is pretty much mandatory if you want accelerated progress.
Right.
After you've got those initial high-frequency words down, the 625, maybe up to the 2000 mark, then you absolutely must customize. Base your vocabulary learning on your specific interest or your job.
So if you're a programmer learning Japanese,
You need words for networking, variables, debugging. Forget poetry for now.
and if you're, say, a car mechanic learning Spanish,
Ignore archaic literature. Go straight for the parts catalog. Learn the words for engine, transmission, brakes, diagnostics.
that makes so much sense. It's the high-value approach. But what about the argument that specializing too early creates gaps in your general knowledge?
That's precisely why the 625 or even the top 1,000, 2,000 words must come first. Those high-frequency words provide the grammatical glue, the common conversational bits you need for just, getting by.
The foundation.
The foundation. The specialized words then sit right on top of that base. And because they're relevant to your life, your interests, they provide immediate utility. That boosts motivation like crazy because you actually see yourself using this stuff.
And we should probably keep using frequency dictionaries to guide that specialization too, even after the first couple thousand words.
Oh, definitely. They're invaluable. They constantly help you prioritize your limited study time. They remind you that, you're probably going to need to say please 10 times more often than you need to say big.
And big, maybe 100 times more often than appearance or something obscure.
Exactly. Your time is finite. Your word choices have to be strategic, almost statistical.
Okay, so we've got these measurable targets, maybe aiming for that 5,500 words for 90% comprehension. We know where to start those visual, concrete words, then specialize. Now, how do we actually get all that information to stick? We need an engine, right? Something to drive it from short-term recall into long-term memory.
And that's where spaced repetition systems, or SRSs, come in. They are the high-octane engine you need.
We often call them flashcards on steroids, but that kind of undersells it, doesn't it? It's not just showing you cards randomly.
Not at all. That analogy really fails to capture the power of the algorithm underneath. These are smart computerized tools. They don't just show you a card. They create a personalized study plan based entirely on your input, on how you interact with each card.
How does it work?
The core idea is to show you a piece of information, a word, a grammar rule, whatever precisely at the moment you're statistically most likely to forget it. It's like personalized memory management on autopilot.
And the key principle behind why they're so effective is this idea of recall, don't review, right?
Absolutely crucial. The system forces you to look at the prompt, maybe the English word or a picture, and actively retrieve the answer from essentially a blank mental slate.
You're not just passively looking at the answer alongside the question and nodding along.
No, that passive review is surprisingly ineffective for long-term memory. You need the active struggle, the retrieval attempt.
And there's some cool brain science behind why that active recall works so much better, isn't there?
There is. It's fascinating. When you successfully recall something, especially something you're a bit worried you might have forgotten, your brain releases a little burst of dopamine.
Ah, the reward chemical.
Exactly. A chemical reward right into the hippocampus, the brain region critical for memory formation. And that dopamine hit literally reinforces the neural pathway you just used to retrieve that memory.
So it becomes, what did one of our sources call it? A drug-fueled memory party in your brain.
Huh. Yeah,
Oh,
that's the quote. And it sounds funny, but it's kind of true. It turns memorization, which can be tedious, into this internally rewarding cycle. Compare that to a traditional word list, where you just stare at 100 words every day whether you know them or not. It's night and day. The old way never stood a chance against that kind of reward system and optimized scheduling.
Can you walk us through the mechanics? Like when you use an SRS app like Anki, you see a card, you answer, and then you have those buttons.
Right. Typically, you'll have buttons like, again, if you completely failed,
Right.
hard if it was a struggle, good if it was okay, and easy if it was instant.
And those buttons aren't just for tracking how you feel about the card, right? They're actually driving the schedule.
Precisely. They're feeding the algorithm. If you hit, again, that card's coming back in maybe a minute or 10 minutes, depending on the settings. But if you hit easy, the system might say, okay, you've got this one nailed down, and schedule it for, say, 7 days, maybe 10 days out.
Wow.
And if you recall it easily then, the next interval might jump to a month, then several months, then a year. You're essentially telling the system, look, I know this nail's hammered in pretty solid. Don't bother me with it again until it's just about to start loosening up.
So ensures your precious study time is spent only on the things you're actually on the verge of forgetting. Maximum efficiency.
Maximum efficiency,
Where?
which makes the daily goal feel much more manageable. You need to focus on setting daily micro goals around consumption of new information, not necessarily mastery of huge chunks.
So the target shouldn't be learn 30 new words today, which sounds daunting.
No, a better target, one of our sources recommend, is aiming for maybe 20 or 30 new cards per day. And remember, one word or concept might actually be broken down into several cards.
Can you give an example of breaking it down?
Sure. Let's say you're learning a complex script, like Chinese characters. One single character, say here for horse, might actually need 3 or 4 different flashcards.
Okay, how so?
Well, you might have one card that shows you the character and asks for the pinyin pronunciation. Another card shows you E and asks for the meaning horse. Maybe a third card shows you the meaning horse and asks you to write or recognize EA. And maybe even a fourth card showing a common compound word using it, like D Shang immediately.
So it feels like more work initially, 4 cards for one concept, but it actually simplifies the task for each review session.
Exactly. You're preventing cognitive overload. You're not trying to juggle the meaning, the sound, the tone, and the visual shape all in one go. And SRS lets you isolate and practice those distinct skills separately until they become automatic.
Okay, that makes sense for managing the review process. Now, what about creating the cards in the first place? It seems tempting to just download a huge pre-made deck of like 10,000 words and get started fast.
The siren song of pre-made decks.
Yeah, but our sources argue pretty strongly against that, right? They advocate for DIY deck building, making your own cards.
They do, and it's absolutely critical, even if it feels slower at the beginning. Here's why. Flashcards are fantastic tools for reminding you of things you've already experienced or learned, but they're actually quite poor at creating those initial, strong, emotionally relevant memories in the first place.
So the act of making the card is part of the learning.
It's a huge part of it. You need the power of creation to help bypass your brain's natural filters for irrelevant information. Think about it. It's the difference between reading a book summary someone else wrote versus writing the summary yourself.
Right. The act of summarizing forces you to engage with the material differently.
Precisely. The physical and cognitive act of building the card, choosing the right image, maybe finding a personal connection to the word, typing out an example sentence that you find meaningful, that process itself starts embedding the information into your working memory right away.
And it adds that crucial element of relevance.
Immediate relevance. A generic flashcard that just says, Das Haus, the picture of a generic house, is okay, but it's impersonal. But when you create that card, maybe you use a picture of your own house or a memorable house you saw on vacation in Germany.
Ah, so you connect it to your own life.
Yes. You connect it to a specific memory, a specific feeling, maybe the name of a friend who lives there. You're creating these personalized memory anchors that makes the word so much more memorable than just a random picture.
That personalized anchor sounds key. And this method, creating your own links, is probably invaluable for tackling those tricky bits of grammar too, like, say, grammatical gender.
Oh, absolutely essential for irregularities. When you had something confusing like in German where most nouns ending in E are feminine, but then you have these annoying masculine exceptions like there, Käse, cheese. They'll just try to drill the rule endlessly. That's painful.
What do you do instead?
You turn it into a vivid, memorable story or image. You use mnemonics.
Can you give us a concrete example? Like, how would you make an abstract thing like gender memorable?
Sure. Let's take French gender. It's notorious. Most nouns ending in age are masculine, like le voyage, the trip, le garage, the garage.
Mm.
But there's a really common, famous exception. La plage, the beach, is feminine.
Right, that's a classic tricky one.
So how do you remember la plage is feminine? You don't just chant plage is feminine, plage is feminine. That's weak. Instead, you create a ridiculous mental image.
Okay, like what?
Imagine a ridiculously huge, like extremely feminine character. Maybe picture Dame Edna Everage or someone similar wearing a massive floppy pink hat, high heels, strutting dramatically across La Plage. She's demanding everyone move her enormous, frilly, definitely feminine beach towel out of the way.
Uh-huh. Okay, I can picture that.
The more ridiculous, the more vivid, the more specific the image, the better. It links the sound of the word plage directly to the concept of feminine in a way that's instantly recallable and, frankly, hard to forget. That's your memory party for French gender exceptions.
Okay, so we've got measurable input goals using vocabulary counts. We've got an efficient engine for memorization with SRS and DIY cards, making things sticky and even fun with mnemonics. Now we need to actually use this knowledge, right? Both to understand input and to start producing output. Let's start with understanding input comprehensible input, or CI.
Right, CI. It's become a bit of a buzzword in language learning circles, but the core idea is really profound. It means input listening or reading that is understandable, but crucially, it's just slightly beyond your current comfort zone.
Often called I+1, right? Your current level, I, plus one new thing.
Exactly. If the input is too easy, just I, you're not really learning anything new, you're just reinforcing what you know. But if it's too hard, like I plus 10, you just get lost, frustrated, and that motivation tanks again. You're drowning.
So the challenge then is finding that sweet spot, that I+1 material, especially when you're learning on your own. How do you know if something is just right or too hard?
It's tricky, but the sources offer a pretty good rule of thumb. If you're reading or listening, and you find yourself only having to look up or guess the meaning of maybe one word per sentence or perhaps one keyword every 30 seconds or so of listening, you're likely in that I+1 zone.
Okay, one unknown word per sentence or per half minute.
Roughly, yeah. If you're constantly hitting 2, 3, or more unknown words in every single sentence or feeling completely lost in the audio, the material is probably too difficult right now. You need to dial it back to something simpler.
That's actually a really useful self-diagnostic tool. So assuming we can find material at the right level, what are some good CI strategies? Especially for listening, which many people find harder than reading.
Well, one of the absolute best resources for CI, especially listening, is native media, movies, and TV shows.
Why are they so good?
Several reasons. First, they're usually story-driven. The plot itself helps carry you along, even if you miss some dialogue. You can often figure out what's happening from the context. Second, and this is huge, you get tons of visual clues.
Facial expressions, body language.
Exactly. The setting, the actions people are taking, all these nonverbal cues dramatically help you infer meaning and understand what you're hearing far more than just listening to, say, a radio broadcast or a podcast with no visuals.
Okay, movies and TV are great CI, but this brings us to a really critical point, a concrete goal you need to aim for and measure, getting rid of the subtitles.
Oh, this is non-negotiable, according to our sources. You have to eliminate subtitles in your target language as soon as you feel even remotely comfortable doing so. Maybe start with subtitles in the target language first, then remove them entirely.
Why is it so important to ditch them? They feel helpful.
They feel helpful, but they become a crutch that hinders progress. Reading is just inherently easier for most literate adults than listening is. If the text is there on the screen, your brain will naturally default to reading it because it's less effort.
So you're basically practicing reading, not listening.
Precisely. You learn primarily with your eyes, not your ears, when subtitles are on. You need that slight struggle, that focused effort of processing purely auditory input to force your brain's listening comprehension skills to actually improve.
Okay, okay. Ditching subtitles is the goal. But it can feel like jumping off a cliff. Is there a way to make that transition easier? A strategy to ensure success when you first turn them off?
Yes, there's a fantastic preparation strategy. It makes the viewing experience much more likely to be a measurable win, not a frustrating failure.
Tell me more.
Before you watch the movie or the TV episode without subtitles, read a detailed summary of the plot in the target language first.
Ah, that's clever. Like, go find the Wikipedia page for the movie in Spanish if I'm learning Spanish.
Exactly that kind of thing. Or a fan wiki, or a detailed review. Reading the summary beforehand does a couple of crucial things. It primes your brain with the necessary vocabulary you're likely to encounter. It introduces the key characters and plot points so you have context.
It reduces the cognitive load when you're actually watching.
Massively. You're not trying to figure out the plot and decode the language simultaneously. You already know roughly what's happening, so you can focus your mental energy on understanding the dialogue related to those events. It makes the whole viewing experience much more comprehensible, much more successful, and turns what could be an overwhelming hour into a really satisfying CI session.
And that success, that feeling of, hey, I actually understood most of that without subtitles, is itself a huge win. It lowers the anxiety.
It lowers the affective filter. Exactly. That stress and anxiety associated with difficult input melts away when you feel confident. Which brings us nicely to the other side of the coin, output. Producing language yourself through speaking and writing.
Right. Input is crucial, but you have to practice output too. But what should the goal of output practice be? Perfect sentences.
Actually, no, at least not initially. Our sources argue quite strongly that the primary goal of early output practice should be to maximize your opportunities for making mistakes.
Wait, the goal is to make mistakes. That sounds counterintuitive. Most
Yeah.
people actively try to avoid errors.
I know it sounds weird, but think about it. Mistakes, especially ones you make yourself and then get corrected on, are described in our sources as the most valuable pedagogical errors.
Okay, why valuable?
Because discovering an error you made or having a native speaker gently correct something you said or wrote triggers an emotional response. It might be surprise, oh, I thought it was that way. It might be slight annoyance, ugh, I keep making that mistake. It might even be mild offense if the correction feels blunt. But whatever the emotion, surprise, frustration, wonder, those feelings are incredibly powerful tools for memory fixation. They essentially flag the correction in your brain as important, locking it into your long-term memory far more effectively than if you just passively read the correct grammar rule in a textbook.
So we actually want situations where we make mistakes and get helpful feedback.
We should seek them out. And one of the absolute highest value activities for generating these productive, correctable mistakes is collaborative writing.
Collaborative writing, like working with a tutor or a language partner on a piece of text.
Exactly. Studies consistently show that engaging in this kind of collaborative writing where you try to express your own thoughts, struggle a bit, make errors, and then receive corrections, specifically tailored to what you were trying to say, produces the most memorable and highest impact input possible.
Can you describe that cycle?
Sure. The cycle looks something like this. You try to communicate an idea in writing. You maybe struggle to find the right word, so you look it up. That's active learning. You inevitably make some grammatical errors. A native speaker, tutor, or even a knowledgeable peer reviews it and corrects your sentences, maybe explaining why. And then this is key. You immediately take those corrected sentences with their new vocabulary and corrected grammar and turn them into new flashcards for your SRS. So you're directly linking your own output attempt, the errors you made, and the specific corrections back into your input and memorization engine.
Precisely. It closes the loop perfectly. And this process, it translates into staggering, measurable improvements in language production. You mentioned data earlier showing huge gains.
Yeah, what were the specifics? What kind of results did people get from doing this? Okay, the studies focusing on this collaborative writing model found that after a structured period, usually involving participants writing short narratives or essays about their own lives or opinions and getting specific, targeted feedback, they increased the average length of their written output by a very precise 39.67%.
Wow, nearly 40% longer sentences or texts. That's a huge jump in complexity and fluency.
It's massive. And it wasn't just writing. The impact on spoken production was even more dramatic. The average number of words participants spoke in follow-up conversational tasks increased by an incredible 68.57%.
68%. That's phenomenal. Why did it work so well?
Because the learners weren't just practicing abstract grammar drills. They were actively working on expressing their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own stories. The language they were learning and getting corrected on was immediately personally relevant. That makes the corrections stick like glue.
And presumably, this process also felt less intimidating.
Absolutely. The participants in these studies consistently reported that focusing on this kind of comprehensible input and collaborative, feedback-rich writing significantly lowered their general language learning anxiety. It boosted their motivation.
So it directly lowered that affective filter we talked about.
Drastically. And that reduction in anxiety, that increase in confidence and motivation, that's a crucial small victory in itself. It might not be a number on a chart, but it's what guarantees you'll keep showing up and making progress. Okay, so we have these effective practices, measurable goals, SRS, CI, collaborative output. To make this all sustainable, to turn it into a long-term habit, we also need to choose the right tools and resources. Tools that support these small steps and deliver information in manageable chunks.
Right, because overwhelm leads straight back to burnout. So start small with resources.
Exactly. When you're picking vocabulary resources, especially early on, the sources strongly caution against grabbing the biggest, most comprehensive dictionary or grammar book off the shelf.
Why not? Isn't more information better?
Not always. It can lead to serious information overload. Think about a massive desk dictionary. You look up a common word like house, and it might give you 10 different synonyms, nuances, idioms, maybe 4 different grammatical contexts for a related verb.
Okay, yeah, that can be paralyzing when you're just starting.
It is. Right now, you probably only need the one most common primary meaning. And you'll find that single high frequency, meaning much more easily and with less distraction, in a smaller, more focused resource like a good phrase book, a thematic vocabulary builder, or even a learner's dictionary designed for your level.
And keep using those frequency dictionaries, too, to make sure the small chunks you are learning are the most useful ones.
Absolutely. Always prioritize based on frequency. It keeps your learning efficient.
The other huge factor for sustaining momentum, which we've touched on, is keeping it fun. If the process feels like a chore, those mental filters just slam shut, right? And the effort is wasted.
It's critical. The tools and methods must incorporate elements of fun and engagement. Otherwise, your brain flags it as work. And work often gets forgotten quickly unless it's immediately rewarding. This is where stories and mnemonics come back in again, especially for tackling difficult grammar.
We talked about the Dame Edna on the beach for French gender.
Right. When you hit those confusing irregularities, maybe it's complex noun cases in German or Russian, or notoriously irregular verbs in Spanish for French, you absolutely must avoid just dry, repetitive drilling. That's soul-destroying.
So instead, you weave them into
Vivid, memorable stories. Little mental movies. You turn the abstract rule into a concrete narrative.
Can you give us another example? Show how a story can conquer a confusing pattern, maybe with verbs.
Sure, let's take Spanish verbs. English speakers often struggle with the simple past tense, the preterite, because it has whole groups of irregular verbs. One notorious group is the U-stem verbs, verbs where the stem vowel changes to a U in the preterite, like tenor to have becoming tuvo, she had, poner to put becoming puso, saber to know, becoming supo.
Okay, yeah, remembering which verbs fall into that weird U group can be tough.
Exactly. So instead of just memorizing a list tenor, poner, saber, poter, star, you link them all together with a simple, crazy visual story.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine an astronaut let the U in U-stem stand for universe or UFO. So this astronaut is floating in space. The star was located. He's having trouble. He doesn't have tenor tuvo, the right tool. He tries to put poner puso, a square peg, into a round hole on his spaceship. He realizes he knew, saber sapo, this wouldn't work. He was able, poter puto, to fix it eventually, but almost fell off the moon.
Haha, okay, that's ridiculous. But I can see how linking astronaut to have be located in a silly story would make remembering their group much easier than just a list.
The sillier, the more visual, the more action-packed the story, the better your brain anchors that pattern. You're applying the power of narrative to what is essentially dry technical data.
That's brilliant. And for reading practice, the sources suggest a similar strategy using familiarity, right? Choosing familiar stories.
Yes, another highly effective low-stress CI strategy. Find a translation of a book you absolutely loved reading in your native language. Or pick a book that was turned into a movie you've seen multiple times.
And then read it. with an audiobook.
Yes. Read the physical book or ebook while listening to the audiobook in the target language simultaneously.
Now, that almost sounds like cheating.
It feels like it, but it's actually incredibly strategic language acquisition. The audiobook does a few things. It carries you along, enforcing a natural rhythm and pace. It prevents you from getting bogged down, stopping to look up every single word you don't know.
Because you already know the story. You know what's happening, who the characters are.
Precisely. The plot and context are already fixed in your mind, so you can relax and let the language wash over you more. You absorb vocabulary and sentence structures more naturally. It turns what could be a frustrating slog through a difficult text into maybe 12, 15, 18 hours of concentrated, relatively enjoyable input. You're building your sight vocabulary and your auditory processing skills at the same time, anchored by a story you already care about.
You know, listening to all these strategies, SRS, targeted CI, collaborative output, using stories and mnemonics, it really sounds less like language learning depends on some kind of innate magical gift and more like,
Right.
well, like an engineering problem you can solve with the right systems.
That's exactly how our sources frame it. Success in language learning is overwhelmingly determined by factors you can control. Your motivation, your perseverance, your diligence in applying effective methods. It's really not about innate ability for the vast majority of people.
So that student who, drops out of Chinese class after 1 month complaining they aren't fluent yet.
They're suffering from a combination of crippling impatience and completely unrealistic abstract goals. They haven't experienced enough small wins to keep them going.
They need that antidote to impatience. They need to understand that it's built brick by brick.
They really do. They need to internalize the idea that every single piece of knowledge they acquire, every word, every grammar pattern, every pronunciation nuance is like a little nail hammered into the wall. It might seem small on its own, but it becomes a hook on which you can hang. Other words, related grammar, more context, nothing exists in isolation.
And if you quit early, you lose the chance for that compounding effect.
Exactly. You lose the opportunity to build on that valuable foundation you started. We might feel slow compared to kids sometimes, but let's be clear. Adults are generally better and faster at explicit language learning if they use these kinds of sophisticated strategies. We have better pattern recognition, better analytical skills, more life experience to draw on for connections. We just have to stick with the method and learn to celebrate those small, daily, weekly victories. So it really boils down to this. If you can consciously shift your focus away from that vague, distant, often demotivating endpoint of fluency, and instead focus entirely on the immediate, concrete, maybe even dopamine-releasing victory right in front of you.
Like what?
Like successfully mastering those 30 new SRS cards today, or committing to finding and learning those core 625 concrete visual words this week, or understanding 90% of a simple news article or a kid's story by the end of the month. If you focus on those kinds of goals, you practically guarantee continuous trackable progress.
You're essentially trading that big, scary, abstract goal for a whole series of smaller, manageable, maybe even addictive wins.
Precisely. Addictive is a good word for it, thanks to the psychology of SRS and measurable progress.
So what does this all really mean for the listener? I think the sources remind us pretty powerfully that we need to stop that unfair comparison game. Stop comparing our few hundred hours of focused adult study to the thousands of hours of immersive, unstructured exposure that children get.
Right. It's apples and oranges.
And the data actually suggests that when we adults do focus our efforts using efficient systems like SRS, targeted CI, and strategic output practice, we often learn languages faster and more efficiently than kids do, at least in terms of reaching specific communicative goals. Your brain is absolutely capable of this.
The key is that perspective shift. Making the journey itself, the daily engagement, the measurable progress making, that the reward, not some far-off, ill-defined destination.
Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take into your next study session. We heard that the data is crystal clear. Engaging in collaborative writing, where you get feedback on your own attempts to communicate, can dramatically boost your output, increasing spoken word count by nearly 70% in some studies.
A huge lever.
Knowing that statistical reality, knowing how powerful that feedback loop is, what is the one concrete step, the one accountability measure you could put in place today to ensure you get some form of external correction on your own language output sometime this week?
Will you finally schedule that first session with an online tutor? Will you find a language exchange partner on an app and commit to writing them a paragraph? Will you join a forum and post a short journal entry asking for corrections?
Just one single measurable step towards getting that high-value feedback. Take that step, trust the methodology we've unpacked today, and let that system start working for you.